Jazakumullah khair for that kind introduction. It's my honor and pleasure to be here amongst yourselves. I've been here to Leeds before, but I've never been to this mosque. So it's a wonderful opportunity for myself. Just a disclaimer, I think the artwork, the poster work went out slightly before, but the title of this topic would have been active parenting, not just parenting, because parenting itself is has a very wide scope. What do you mean when you say parenting? Everyone has their own ways of parenting their children, but I wanted to touch upon a particular niche sort of topic related to parenting itself, which I personally call active parenting. And Jazakumullah khair, welcome once again. Thank you very much for coming. I live in Oldham, and the other day I was driving past Oldham College. Then I noticed two teenage girls wearing hijabs walking down the road. And I thought, mashallah, these sisters are donning the hijab at such a young age. I was in for a surprise as to what I was going to see next. I saw one of them take a puff and then pass the cigarette to the other sister. And these two sisters are both wearing hijab. Right? I was shocked to my core. I did not expect such a scene. And although this scene is something that ought to paralyze us as parents, Muslim parents, we really need to ask ourselves the question, why would some sisters wearing the hijab, which represents the Muslim identity, dress code, do something that contradicts the Muslim code of ethics? Because the moment you see somebody wearing an Islamic attire, you expect them to carry themselves in a certain way. You don't expect them to carry out an action that contradicts their value, their religion, right? Something that's quite un-Islamic, so to speak. And the problem can be pinpointed as such, that we as parents put a lot of emphasis on our children to do what seems to be Islamic, than teach them what means to be Islamic. As that's the key principle. And I'll repeat that once again, that we parents put a lot of emphasis on teaching our children what it seems to be Islamic than what it means to be Islamic. Right? So wearing hijab itself can seem Islamic, but if one does not fully appreciate the meaning of hijab, then they will wear the hijab and still manage to be immodest at the same time. You see a lot of people who wear abayas, but still there's this very little sense of modesty in the way they carry themselves, in the way they wear their dress. And so when our children are small, when they are toddlers, we can tell them pretty much everything that we want them to do ourselves. Well, we choose their clothing, we provide their food, we choose their schools, right? We take them to places. We sometimes guide them as well and tell them who to stay away from amongst their friends, right? And that's because they're very much reliant on us, all right? The parents are very much at control of how our children should experience the world. But as they're growing up, they're slowly becoming their own person. They develop their own likes and dislikes, right? They have a better understanding of the world, how the world functions. They're using their own intellect, their own preferences. They have their own opinions. They voice their own opinions. They tell you, Daddy, I don't like this, right? Or I prefer that, perhaps. So they're becoming more independent. And as they're becoming more self-reliant, more independent, not needing their parents anymore, they step into this new stage of their life. And in this new stage, the children are the ones who make their own decisions. All right? And this is probably the most difficult and challenging phase for a parent, because as far as the parent and child relationship is concerned, inshallah, for most parents, at least I would like to believe that it's not too difficult. The children are still obedient to their parents. But you do come across these stories, horror stories at times, where the children, the parents, they come up to the Imam Sahib and says, please can you give me some du'as to read, or can you do something about my son, because my son would not listen to me at all. He's gone downhill, right? The children may want to dress in a certain way that the parents are not comfortable. Right? The children may develop habits that the parents don't expect of them, right? And worse still, when the parents force these types of children to conform to a certain lifestyle, you see they go outside and they do the exact opposite of what you expect of them, as happened to these two sisters, as I mentioned as I started my talk. And so, brothers and sisters, I have in a very short form summarized the different stages a child goes through in their life until they reach adulthood. When they're born and they're still quite young, up until the age of 7, they're completely under your care. They're reliant on you. They look at you for protection, safety, security, right? And you as a parent, you make decisions for them constantly. But after that, past that age, before they hit puberty, this is the time when they're slowly becoming aware of the whole world around them. And they take very little input from you as parents, because they want to make their own decisions slowly. And once they have hit puberty and reached the next stage, they are capable of making their own decisions, and they may not need you anymore. And these 3 stages are beautifully summarized by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, when he said that, and some say that this is probably perhaps a hadith by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, play with your children for the first 7 years of their life, then teach them for the next 7 years, and for the next 7 years or thereafter, advise them. Right? At the first stage, at the beginning stage of their life, the children, they're constantly noticing you, they're watching you, they're mimicking you, they're following your every action, your every move. They seek protection from you, and they're clingy. You know, those times when they call you, they seek attention and they say, Daddy, come and play with me with the Lego. You don't have any interest, but they have that interest. What they're trying to do all along is they're trying to build a relationship with you. And through that relationship, they're finding trust in you. Right? And so this relationship grows stronger when you give them what they want. If the child wants attention or is looking for a play partner and you ignore them constantly, that will cause a lack of trust. And what that does is, let me give you an example. I'm sure everyone, including myself, we have had children who had temper tantrum in supermarket. I've had those times when my son went to the park and he just started rolling on the ground, and I'm thinking, should I call my wife, because I really don't know what to do now, right? Even at that moment, when they're having that temper tantrum in the supermarket, if a scary person comes to them, and at that moment, perhaps your son or child does not like you as much as they do other times, they will still come running at you for protection and security. Because the only person they know who can guarantee them safety and security is you. When somebody is born, they're very fragile, right? They want that, they know that they're weak, and they seek that protection and safety. And somehow or the other, they have associated safety, security, protection with you as the parent, with you as the father, with you as the mother. And so, what happens is, this child who has placed so much trust in you now finds himself confused when you as a parent refuse to spend time with them. They're thinking that my parents, they're ready to protect me and care for me, but they're not ready to be with me other times when I need them for my emotional needs. Right? When I need them for a cuddle, when I'm casually seeking attention, or I just want them to be around and play with me. Right? And so all the while, this child is trying to create a bond, a relationship with you, our children. But because of our lack of participation, this relationship remains weak. And when such a relationship does not grow, the trust level drops. As they grow older, in their later years, it may even cause a barrier for them to open up. Many a times it so happened that a child may get bullied at school, but they wouldn't come and confide in you as the parent, but they would probably speak to their friends at school or their teacher. They're not comfortable with you. They're going through physical changes as they're going through that stage in their life, but they wouldn't come and seek guidance and help from you as the father, because that relationship wasn't there in the first place, perhaps, right? And that's exactly why I call today's talk active parenting, because we as parents, we really need to take an active role as parents. Caring for children can come in many different shapes or forms. You can buy them gadgets, iPhone 14 now, or is it 15? You can buy them PS6 or 5, PS5? PS5, okay, thank you. Right? You of course as a parent provide them with shelter, food, clothing. But in reality, it's those experiences and the memories that you make with them that solidifies that relationship, right? If you're struggling to find that time, perhaps you want to cut down on your work. You're working 9 to 5, perhaps 6 days a week, and then over the weekend you have other job. For what? Because the way the social system works here, a child goes to school in the morning at 9 o'clock, comes back at 3 o'clock, then they're getting ready in a rush, in a hurry to come to the maktab, to the madrasa, 5 to 7. When do you actually get the time for parenting? When do you actually get the time to spend, when do you get the opportunity to spend some quality time with your children? It's as if the children are actually being parented at school and through their gadgets more than being parented by you as a parent. Right? So that human contact, that human touch, parent-child relationship, it's getting difficult by the day for it to grow and develop. So that's something all of us, we need to bear in mind. How do you know what they like or dislike? When was the last time you had a fireside chat, as we say? Right? Had an open chat, or just have that conversation with your child. How open, how comfortable are your children with yourselves? Right? Because if the child does not believe that you as a parent are genuinely interested in you, then what's the likelihood of the child being interested what you want from them? It's a reciprocational relationship. It's a two-sided relationship, right? So for you to get the best out of your child, you need to be the best version of yourself to them. And so active parenting, therefore, besides instilling this sense of trust in your children, it strengthens the relationship, and it also develops a positive feeling in them about you, i.e. the parent. Now, let me ask this question. You know, we have, I'm sure you have seen those reality TV programs where they swap family members for a week or so, right? How do you as a father or a mother know that your child really likes you? Of course, they stick to you because you're their parent there, you're providing for them. But if in a different world they were given the opportunity to swap you as a parent for somebody else, perhaps one of their friends' father or mother, would they do that? Would you be confident to say, no, not in a million years, he will never pick anybody apart from myself? Right? So that's something, food for thought, something for us to think about. How much value are we providing as parents to our children? Right? I recently went on a trip over the weekend as an extended family. We hired this place in Wales, and one of my family members, young nephew, so we went on a Friday, and I asked him on a Sunday, did you speak to your dad? And he goes, no, he did not phone me. And I was thinking, so you expect your dad to phone you? You could not phone? Right? So what became apparent was that relationship. That relationship is not there, that he's not missing his dad enough for him to think, I need to phone my dad. Right? He's thinking, I am entitled to receive a phone call from my dad. If my dad misses me, he should phone me. Why should I? Right? So it just goes to show that the relationship is perhaps not strong. And that's the first stage. So if I could summarize the first stage of this relationship, this is the time when you want to give the children your utmost attention to strengthen that relationship, for that bond to develop, so that they trust you in every matters of their life, right? Not just to seek protection and care and food and shelter, right? But in every matter, be their best friend. That's the first stage. Moving on to the second stage of a child's life, and this is when we start teaching them. And it's very crucial to have a first stage, a successful first stage, because the success in the second stage depends on how successful you were in the first stage, right? You ask any high school teacher whether their job is difficult or not, and they'll tell you, I hate my job. Because every other day the children, they're being rude, they're being violent, they're throwing stuff at me as I'm writing the lesson on the board, they're throwing slurs at me, right? Why? Because these high school children, you cannot control them. They're misbehaved, they're rowdy, they're violent, right? They don't know what boundaries are. They literally don't know what the difference is between good or bad. They do what pleases them, what they desire, right? All because it's fun. And the only reason is they have a lack of sense of morality, what it means to be good or bad. In other words, akhlaq, manners, right? And that's why Prophet ﷺ would often make this dua. He said, Allahumma ahsanta khalqi, right? Fa ahsin khuluqi. Oh Allah, you have perfected me in this physical being, just like that, perfect my manners. Because these two complement each other. You can be the most machoest man around, but if you have a bad mouth, people are not going to want to hang around you for long. People will not have respect for you, right? And so the essence of akhlaq, morals or manners, is that it allows you to distinguish, differentiate, right, between good and bad, and for you to identify the boundaries. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed some boundaries, right? And so apart from being taught, the usual, thank you and please, right, we have to really make an active effort, take the pain of teaching our children what it means to be well-mannered, right? And of course the scenario or the scene back home in Bangladesh or Pakistan is very different. You hardly ever see any child disrespect their teachers, because from a very young age the parents, they set this boundary. They say, look, teachers come right after parents, and if you don't respect the teachers, my weapons are going to come out, the danda and the chappal, or the belt in worst case, right? And therefore loving them and caring for them and spending time with them in the first stage will make teaching anything much easier in the second stage. And teaching them morals and manners first will make it even more easier for you to teach them any other thing that are relevant and important to them. And as you're teaching your children good manners, morals, you also teach them how to behave, but also where to draw boundaries. Boundaries are extremely important. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, when he narrates the story of Adam alayhi salam in the Quran, what does he say? He says, وَلَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ وَلَا تَقْرَبَ هَذِهِ الشَّجَرَةِ. That you guys, you two, right, knock yourself out. Eat and drink to your heart's pleasure, to your heart's content. But there's one boundary, then there's one prohibition, which is, I don't want you to come anywhere near this tree. So therefore, laying down boundaries, principles, is actually part of our religion. And think of it, if you don't have boundaries and principles, then our society will collapse. A society, we have seen that in Qatar, in the recent Football World Cup, right? Qatar was very staunch on certain principles, and of course the media would portray Qatar in a very different way, but you speak to those people who had first-hand experience of the World Cup, they went there, none of them would have a negative thing to say. In fact, all the ladies, the Western ladies who had been there, they would come back and say, this is the first time we have experience football without being taunted, without experiencing any sort of abuse, because there are some boundaries in that society, in that community, right? And so now you're teaching them good manners and morals. In this stage, you introduce them to learning the deen, because the lesson of our religion is that life is about meeting expectations. There are certain expectations from yourself. Just like a person is expected to behave in a certain way with their neighbor, with their friend, with their colleague, right? His parents, he's expected to behave in a certain way towards his creator. And that becomes easier when they learn very early on in their life that it's about managing expectations. That you as a Muslim, you're expected to carry yourself in a certain way. And when they have learned that for a certain period of time, and then you introduce them to the depth of the religion and tell them that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expects of you, it's not something new for them. They understand that life is all about managing expectations. A relationship is all about managing expectations, right? And being able to meet expectations themselves is what makes a youth a man. Because responsibility is about meeting expectations. You see so many times back home, you see these videos going around on social media. A 10-year-old child would walk miles to fetch water. Or a little girl, 10-year-old, 11-year-old girl, they're looking after the rest of the family. How come the children here in UK cannot do that? Because back home, it's expected of the children to look after their family. But over here, we don't entrust our children with that expectation, with that responsibility early on. They're mollycoddled, right? They're looked after so well that they don't understand what it means to actually take up responsibility. And that's why you see a lot of young men, rather men, who get married at a much later stage, because they just can't deal with the idea of being burdened with responsibility. I can't even deal with myself. How am I going to look after somebody else or two or three other people in the next few years after marriage, right? And in regard to teaching them skills, Ali ibn Abi Talib, again I'm quoting him, he mentioned something beautiful. He said, "Allimu awladakum," teach your children, as-sibaha, teach them how to swim, wa rimaya, archery, wa rukub al-khayl, how to ride horses. And if you think of it, all these activities, they teach you one way or the other resilience, right? Resilience meaning how you get back up after a failure. Dealing with difficult situations. You know, when you find yourself in the depth of water and you're trying to swim just to keep afloat, it's not easy. And so from a young age, you start learning these skills, right? Being in control. When you're riding the horse and you're controlling the horse itself, it teaches you how to control yourself better, right? But not just that. Don't just, limit it to those skills. But how often do we teach our children financial skills, for example? We expect them not to waste money, but we don't teach them how to deal with money. Right? Jewish people, they have these, now I must give them credit, from a very young age they start giving their children money, pocket money. And they teach their children how to budget. Right? So when they grow up, no wonder the Jewish people, they become businessmen. Right? And I came across this story once and I thought, what a noble idea. That this young guy who just got into the university, and of course as you go into the university you get your waiver or bursary or whatever you call it, right? I come from back home. I came here when I was 19 to study, and I had to pay money from my pocket to study my bachelor's. But here you guys get money to get to study. When I came across this idea, I was confused. How does that work, right? But I see my young cousins and nephews, they order takeaway every other day with the money. And I think to myself, what a waste. But then I came across this young man, the story of a young man who actually saved up the money, around £10,000 or so, and he went and bought a house. Somebody must have taught him how to use money. Thank you very much. He didn't have to. Right? Somebody taught him how to use money. So we as parents, we need to teach them skills in life. Right? All sorts of skills that we feel are beneficial to them in this current day and age in this climate. Then comes the third stage. And in this third stage, perhaps they have attained the age of 14, but there's no limit. Somebody could mature when they're 10, somebody could mature when they're 12 or 13, right? So there's no specific boundaries as such. Maturity comes with how much responsibility you as a parent prepared to entrust on your children from a young age, right? So this is the stage when the children, they start making their own decisions. And this is perhaps one of the most difficult stages for a parent, to actually see their children making their own decision. The same child who you have had under your wing for the first 14, 15 years, and you don't want them to make any mistake. You don't want them to make the wrong decision, right? But what you and I need to realize is that they're now full adults, and you can only advise them, but you cannot force them. And that letting go can be very difficult, extremely difficult for as a parent, because you care for them. But this is the day that you have been, or you should have been preparing them for, to let them go, to make their own decision, because they're not going to be with you forever, right? Because forcing them against their wishes will only cause hurt, and it may cause distress and result in emotional abuse, right? I have a family member who is in his mid-40s, and he keeps at least several times he told me this story, how right after his graduation he had this opportunity to travel to London for this job, and he's obviously from Oldham himself, but his mother did not allow him to, right? And he's telling me this story. I can sense that regret in his voice. So he's a man who is in his mid-40s, but at his 20s, when he had that opportunity, he could not capitalize on that opportunity simply because his mother insisted that he stayed back. So for 25 years, he's harboring that same regret and resentment. Do you see what I mean? That we as parents, of course, we want their best, but you can only advise them at that stage. Once they've reached that third stage in their life, they have to make their own decision. How long are you going to be around to make decisions for them? They're their own human beings, right? And the thing is, the beautiful thing is that at those young years, the children, they themselves trusted us. Now it's our turn to trust them. Give that trust back to them and say, you know what? I think you can make your own decision. And if you have prepared them well in the first two stages, then inshallah ta'ala they will make the right decisions and the choices in their life. So to conclude, every stage every stage in the life of a child offers us parents opportunities to work on our relationship, this parent-child relationship, to grow together, to build trust and strengthen the bond between ourselves. And the sooner this bond can be established, the easier it will be for us to mold them according to how we expect them to be in the future. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Feel free to share your reflections, any questions, any thoughts. Barakallahu feekum.
If anybody has any questions, just feel free to...
Not just questions, any thoughts, any reflections, or what you might have experienced in your, parenting your children. I'm here to learn, not just to talk.
Often what happens is the children from the age of 14 until they're somewhere near 18, 20s, they seem to think that they are very much in control and feel that they are better than the others and they know better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And often they intend, depending on what sort of society they're in, not just the parenting, it's the society and the people they hang around with. That's where they pick up most of their influences.
The environment.
And that gets them sometimes the wrong lives, wrong impression
Yes.
of what they want to do.
Absolutely.
And it becomes a sort of a
that pushes them to make wrong decisions, perhaps,
Wrong
because
decision,
they think they have.
It's what's the word? The confrontation between the parents and the kids.
Absolutely, and I think Buzuk, Jazakumullah khair for that beautiful point. I think, you know, we if we were to ask our children, who's your best friend, what's the likelihood that our children will say, my best friend is my dad, or my best friend is my mom? They'll say, my best friend is Usama from next door, right? So why don't we try and be their best friend, so that they always come and do mashura with us, rather than ask Sheikh Google online or their friends, hey, you know, I found myself in this problem or in this difficulty, what do you think I should do? That's how I see. Sisters?
I think, like you were saying, that you have to have that friendly approach. Be the friend, your mother, and the father as well, discipline. But there's a limit as well for us as well. We need to be their friends as well.
Absolutely.
They can come to us.
Absolutely. We're very one-dimensional. We just discipline them.
You say we love our children so much.
Yeah.
We need to give them, yes, we give them the boundaries, but we have to have that friendly touch, give them the hugs.
Absolutely.
Give them the love as well. You say you love them, but show them physical as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
You can say that I really love you, but they said no, that they're just words for them.
That's right.
So use that emotion.
Absolutely. That's so important.
It's never too late to change.
Yeah. Sister.
Yes, I just like to say you need to understand the difference between the culture and the religion. Because the culture, it spoils the children's mind. Because the old generation are not educated in the Islam as much as we are now, the first generation that were brought up here. But they need to understand the difference between the culture and the religion. Because some children get blackmailed by the older generation saying that, oh no, you can do this, you can do this. But that's in culture, not the religion.
Sure.
Or whilst we're trying to enforce the religion, there's competition going on.
Sure.
So you need to understand the religion more with the children.
I think it's interfering, like with the same, like with a family. So the parents will discipline their children, but there'll be grandparents that will intervene and say, no, do that. And then the children will go for the easy option, isn't it, really?
Absolutely. I think when it comes to inculcating piety, righteousness in children, we may send them to school, madrasa, abroad, but really, truly, first and foremost, it comes from the parent. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Kaf, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the two children who had that, they had this money or the wealth left behind by their parent, by their dad, which was buried under the wall, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَنْزٌ لَهُمَا وَكَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. That, the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has safeguarded that money, put it away for those two yatim children, was only because, for one reason, كَانَ أَبُوهُمَا صَالِحًا. Their father was a righteous person. So if the father is righteous, it automatically has an impact on the children, next generation who are coming forth. Right? So for us to expect our children to be righteous, having good standing in the community, be able to discern between good and bad, we have to be our best version ourselves. When we show it to them, what do they say? Monkey do, monkey. Monkey say, monkey do. Monkey say, monkey do. That's not a good example, but don't say to your children what you want them to do. Do it yourself; they will do it. Right? I, of course, fall short of that myself. Brothers, maybe one last reflection or comment? Anyone? Youngsters, what did you get out of it? I think, where is my dad going to get me the next iPhone?
Come on from your hiding box.
Barakallahu feekum. If there's no more ta'liqat, if there's no more comments or reflections, perhaps we can conclude here. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair once again for taking the time and coming.
Jazakallah khair.